Well, that doesn't bode too well. It's not good news at all. S&P has downgraded the U.S. credit rating for the first time in history. So let's find out what the action has been across global markets and what kind of ramifications this would have on markets such as our own. James Glassman joins us now to talk about that. James, hi, morning. Thanks so much for joining in. What is your initial reaction to what has come out of the global markets, the jobs data, and how you would react to the S&P downgrade?
You know, the downgrade has been discussed and argued about for quite some time now in the U.S. markets. So I suspect it will generate a lot of headlines for sure in the press. But I think down the road it'll probably prove to be somewhat irrelevant for the following reason. There are three rating agencies that count. The other rating agencies maintain their AAA rating. So what that means is as long as there's two rating agencies that are the same, it's not going to change anything. The regulators also put out a statement that said for risk-weighting assets, for purposes of calculating regulatory capital of the banks, they're not going to change the way they treat treasuries. So it kind of diffuses the impact it would have on the regulators. Thirdly, the investors know far more about the sustainability of the U.S. situation than the rating agencies do. They debate this all the time, and I think you go around and I think most investors know that whatever Standard & Poor's says, nobody doubts that the U.S. government will ever not pay on their obligations on their debt. And I think part of the problem is, there's two other problems here, is that the rating agency, Standard & Poor's, when you look at their statement, they really don't distinguish between cyclical pressures and structural pressures. And this is a problem that everybody around the world faces. When economies go into recession, deficits get very bad. But the bond market tells you interest rates in the U.S. are the lowest I can remember ever. And what that tells you is that bond investors understand that the deficits will come down when the economies recover. That's not the issue. The issue is what is the long-term sustainability, and there are long-term challenges in the U.S. They have to do with entitlement spending, as everybody around the world faces. But this is a political process, and it requires a political response. And I suspect the rating agencies, this is an unusual thing to get into this game, to change the rating because of an opinion about the political process. The problem is this story is not finished, and over the course of many years, the political process is going to have to continue to address this issue, and I suspect they will. And so I suspect for all those reasons, most people are going to shrug this off.
Well, that's a relief to hear, James. But, you know, more than the debt ceiling issue, it's the slowdown in the manufacturing data and, overall consumer confidence that has rattled the street. What did you make of the better-than-expected non-farm payroll data that came out? Do you think there would be a relief rally in the equity markets?
You know, it was a very confusing day. There should be a relief rally because I think people have become very fearful that the U.S. was close to slipping into another recession. I think the job market data were seen as a relief. They do challenge some of the pessimism that we've been seeing. And I think, as the Federal Reserve has been saying, it's no mystery in why the U.S. economy slowed. The disruptions in Japan to the auto industry have really rippled throughout the world economy in the manufacturing sector. Those are beginning to get behind us. And the other problem is oil prices ran up very sharply earlier this year. They squeezed consumers, and that's why the consumer sector slowed down. I think the problem is the market, in the context of this ongoing battle about the debt ceiling and deficit, the market has gotten very nervous. And I think right now there's just a lot of fear, and it doesn't help that the Europeans are still struggling with their debt crises. So my own opinion is that the economy is going to be doing better over the second half of the year. I think the Federal Reserve had it right when they said these are transitory shocks that are slowing the U.S. economy. They seem to be clearing, and I think very soon we ought to see more news like the job market report. Job market report is very mysterious because if the U.S. economy really is as slow as they say, it's mysterious why there would be much job growth at all. So I think it challenges the notion that the U.S. is grinding to a halt.
But there are some disconcerting, comments that S&P has made where they do say that the deficit reduction plan did not go far enough to stabilize the country's debt, and the U.S. markets have been reeling, the U.S. economy has been reeling under debt for a really long time. How much of a ramification do you see this have on global equities?
I suspect it's not clear. Equity markets have always been hearing about this possibility. There are some technical issues there's some unknown things that could happen, but the truth is, it's a little premature for Standard & Poor's to be stepping in like this, because part of the budget agreement, not only was there an agreement to cut spending now, but there is a plan to revisit and try to address longer-term issues by the fall. So I think many people thought the Standard & Poor's might wait to see what the full program was, because you would suspect if they actually do come up with something more, my suspicion is by the time our budget referees process all this information and show you the budget outcome for the next 10 years, it's going to appear as though the deficit is on a sustainable path. Deficit relatively low as a share of GDP, with the debt ratio stabilizing. This is always what happens when you go into a recession. Deficits go up, they seem unsustainable. When the economies recover, these deficits come down. It's an issue, it's a situation that virtually everybody around the world sees when they get a recovery. So I suspect at the end of the day, the initial shock may be worth a few days, worth reaction, but I think at the end of the day, this announcement's not going to have much of a lasting impact.
All right, thanks so much, James, for joining us and giving us that update. In fact, that's quite a relief to hear that it won't have too much of an impact on global equity markets. What looked good, though, were the non-farm payroll numbers, or the jobs data that came in. The number of jobs grew by about 117,000 in the month of July, much higher than what the street was expecting.